All right. So here's the thing, and I kind of want to talk about this subject, right? Because a lot of the time we don't really understand. So we are a product of what we eat, right? We are a product of what we eat. We are a resemblance of what we choose to ingest and put into our bodies, right? Meaning our our attitudes, our behavior is linked directly to what we put in our bodies, right? We eat the worst foods. Sometimes they're not even considered foods, but we eat some of the most nastiest, dirtiest, uh, filthiest creatures on the planet, and we call it delicacies, right? We call it food. And some of these things are pigs. We eat crabs and lobsters and oysters and certain types of fish, especially catfish and shrimps and prawns and clams. And these things are considered bottom feeders, okay? And we choose to continuously put these things in our bodies. Now, I'm not even going to touch um, a lot of the health issues. I just want to talk strictly about mentality, right? So, what do these things represent? Obviously, they're bottom feeders. They're nasty. They eat without discretion, right? They ingest anything, right? And when we look at ourselves, right? When we are eating these things, right? We resemble or we put off that same mentality, right? We have no discretion. We walk these streets nasty, and we walk these streets filthy, and we walk these streets as a low based people, right? And we are at this point in time the bottom, right? And it's no wonder, because this is what we're choosing to put in our bodies, and so naturally we would take on the spirit or the spirit, the mentality of these creatures that we choose to put. Now, these creatures do have a purpose in this earth, right? They are to be trash compactors, right? Meaning whatever's out there dead and decaying and lifeless, they will go right behind the people or animals that did not want the food that they were eating, and then and ingest it. And then a lot of times, especially with pigs and catfish, they eat their own, right? What does that mean for us, right? Look at it this way: when a person decides to begin to change their mindset, change the way they live, whether health wise, whether they become awakened, whether for spiritual purposes, the first thing they do, right, is they begin to change the way they eat. You get what I'm saying? They become more, they see it as being health conscious, but I see it as being um, uh, spiritually awakened, right? I see it as being uh, um, obviously changing of a mindset, and they begin to work out. They begin to change the way they think. They begin to change the way they act, right? Because they no longer want to be in depressed, low base, low self esteem, ingest anything. They're becoming more focused on a particular way of life, and the first thing they do, they'll start working out, they'll start reading books, they'll start um, doing things to change their mindset. But oftentimes, a lot of times, most times, it begins in a change of diet. So can you see how food, or what we consider food, is linked to the behavior we choose to display to the world? You get what I'm saying? Um a lot of cases, these foods, I know pig and I know crabs and lobster, these foods at one point uh were considered uh these creatures were considered not food. They wouldn't feed these creatures to prisoners, right? Because they deemed them as not being food. You get what I'm saying? And then if we look at us, black people, right? We are um probably the only people who don't have a cultural palette, who don't follow a cultural palette, right? When we say Chinese food, we get, a vision of Chinese food. When we say Mexican food, we get a vision of Mexican food. When we say Indian food, we get a vision of what Indian food is, right? And all these different ethnicities of people, all these different races of people, they understand what they can and what they cannot put in their bodies according to their culture. We can go to a Chinese store. We can go to an Indian store. We can go to um, uh, a, a Mexican store, right? We can go to a Japanese store. We can go to all these different kinds of stores. When we say American food, what do we think of? Hot dogs and hamburgers, right? And apple pies and shit. But is that who we really are? Now, I got on blacks specifically, but I'm not necessarily talking to black people. But I wanted to point that one fact out, right? Because we don't follow a cultural palette. One reason being is because we really don't know who the hell we are since coming here. You get what I'm saying? But that's really besides the point. Like, if we look at ourselves as a bottom people, and this goes for blacks, whites, Chinese, whoever, right? When we start wanting to change our mindset, to wanting to change who we are, both inside and out, naturally and spiritually, one of the first things we do is change our diet. You get what I'm saying? So I guess what I'm saying is, why are we eating these things? Why are we eating these creatures who have a purpose on earth? I'm not saying don't eat meat or anything like that, but the mentality of the creatures that we choose to eat, we tend to take on those mentalities. And if we're eating bottom feeders, there's no reason why we're looking at ourselves as bottom people. There's no reason why we are overweight and high blood pressure and confused and we ingest anything. We take anything as doctrine, right? Why? Because it starts with what we're putting in our bodies. So anyway, let me know your thoughts on that. I holla.